My guest today is Anthony Wall, who is a founder and president of Noēsis, a humanitarian nonprofit dedicated to issues of human sustainability. Anthony spent much of his career in the financial services industry, but continually found himself drawn back to the study of humankind. In 2019, he established Noēsis and created a series of educational videos to explain how primitive compulsions continue to drive modern human interaction. Welcome to Lifeology.
I am real pleased to be here. Thank you.
I am as well. It's interesting. I get so many different pitches for people to be on my show. And when this one was sent to me, I thought, this is something I would like to learn more about as well, because usually we talk about the self-help aspect, which is what we're going to talk about as well as a way to improve humankind. But it's also important to look at the systemic aspect of it. In other words, how we evolved as humans, where we were, where we're going, or where we are currently and where we're going. So I know that you're going to help us understand that. Before we get started, what does Noēsis mean?
Thanks. Noēsis is a Greek word. It means the arrival point of intelligence and understanding. Will you find intelligence here? You won't stay if you don't. That much is certain. Mm-hmm. So it's a Greek word.
That reminds me of Genesis. That reminds me of Genesis as well. So we have the prefix of the gene and then the SS. Is that where that comes from as well? The aspect of that, the intersect there?
Frankly, I'm not sure. I'm only explaining that Noēsis is the arrival.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's fine. And here, I'm just trying to sound smart. Just kidding. So you were from the financial world. You were from the financial world, and all of a sudden you wanted to change. I know you had a liberal arts degree. How did you transition from liberal arts to finance, the financial aspect, and then you worked your way back? What happened for you?
Well, it happened, I think, when upon birth. I was always drawn to observation, and most notably to the observing human behavior at a macro level. There's a real reason for that. But to answer your question directly, when I got into college, Lake Forest College near Chicago, a leafy liberal arts campus, I was drawn immediately to philosophy, immediately. Most notably existential philosophy, which is deductive at its core.
Mm-hmm. Why do we do what we do? Yes. What's the reason of life?
Well, it asks humankind to view itself through a starkly realistic lens, and you will see that that's exactly what we do to bring remedy, not to bring concern or fear.
Yeah. Yeah. So how did you make the transition to finances then?
If I went back in time, I have no regrets whatsoever. What would be the point?
Of course not. Yeah.
I decided I came up in relationship-based sales. I was in national accounts with ADT. I became a financial advisor when I was 43. And after 15 years, I simply was not cut out, quite frankly, for the ins and outs of how relationships can ebb and flow by what the market's doing. I'm not wired for relationships that are bound to how the market's doing.
Sure.
It was something that I wasn't drawn to, and I left it. I retired at 56. Then I came back to do this.
So in 2019, you created Noēsis. What happened that said, I really want to create these educational videos. I want this to happen. What was it that really drew you? Was something in the media that caused that for you?
No, this goes back to macro human behavior. There are a couple of things occurred to me about why macro. There's an actual reason. Here it is. Here's the constant of so many. The behavior of any one individual is utterly unpredictable. The behavior of human groups is 100% predictable. Quite a disparity. So any human group, give it enough time, and I'll explain exactly what it's going to be doing in a few years. Human failure actually occurs in very eerily precise fashion. So it occurred to me that we were looking not at situational failure, that in fact we were looking at a socio-mathematical constant that we got busy looking for and found.
Yeah. Often you talk about human injury. What does that mean?
All right, the human injury is very real. Let me just put this in place. Very
sure.
We're not here to create buzz phrases. What value do we bring with this? We're here to problem solve for human sustainability. If you're going to problem solve, it'd be a real good thing if you weren't full of nonsense, because nobody's going to hang around, and nobody wants to be blamed. Nobody wants to be lectured. We are professional explainers, and we are observers. The human injury, well, because the evolutionary timeline of the human species was largely conjecture even 50 years ago. Now, we can shine a very bright light on it. And when we do, once we see the point of the human injury, you can't unsee it. To answer your question directly, we crossed over about 10 to 20,000 years ago from being completely collaborative beings to acquisition.
What does that mean?
Well, we had nowhere to go after we reached all points of the globe, and a dynamic change. Specifically, what was migratory became stationary. Our
Makes
populations
sense.
grew and grew and grew. That was aided by an agricultural awakening. We domesticated beasts of burden. Our populations grew and grew, and then these would one day be towns, cities, empires. Now, here's the human injury occurred when we crossed over from from collaboration to acquisition. Acquisition is a self-interested model. Our human DNA doesn't recognize it. Rather than looking at the human race as flawed, no, it ignited a biological insult to human DNA when we formed meritocracy. There's a good word right there, meritocracy.
That's good.
So let me ask you. I'll ask a rhetorical question for all your listeners. Do we live in a democracy? Yes, but what's truer? That we live in a financial meritocracy. Okay, let's just get that right out. Let's hear ourselves.
The token aspect of it, token economy. Yep. A token economy is definitely something where. Go ahead. Continue.
While the human injury explains it, we view the failure of human cultures, and there have been 75 major cultures have existed on planet Earth. All of them were disassembled and destroyed by eerily precise mechanisms. I use the word mechanism. Wherever their precision or mechanism of any kind is, now we're in the presence of a constant. Precision by its nature is mathematical. So I began, my next question was, okay, what set off a mathematically failed constant? I arrived at stationary cultures naturally falling into acquisitive behavior and forming two things that are foreign to human DNA: a greater being and a lesser being. Okay, we began to view others as lesser beings. Here is where I need to stop and hover. There's no blame or judgment here. We are explainers. Okay.
Sure.
So we did, in fact, move from highly collaborative, cooperative defaults that are wound around our bones or baked into our DNA. And these would be tested, good way to put it, these would be tested by the dynamics of acquisitive behavior, a class-based system. This was an insult, not a situational one, as our history books explain. They talk about human failure in situational way. No. A mathematical constant is how we fail. That would explain the precision of how we fail. A greater being deludes itself that it is greater, and a lesser being will spend its entire life escaping the lesser station assigned to it.
Interesting. That makes sense.
Now, And that dynamic is the socio-mathematical constant that has destroyed all human cultures.
All 25? Is that all 25 cultures, you think? Or would you believe?
70, 75.
I'm sorry, when am I going to turn it? Wow, that's many more. Yes. Well, hold on. We'll be back in just a second. I'm talking with Anthony, who is the owner, who is the founder of Noēsis. He is talking about the human sustainability factor and where we are as humans and where we're going. We'll be back in just a second. Welcome back. We are talking to Anthony Wall, who is the founder of Noēsis. We were talking about the human sustainability factor. He was talking about the different aspects of the 75 different cultures who have passed away because of the aspect of the greater human and lesser human that's caused a lot of conflict, which is unfortunately has destroyed many cultures. So as we come back into this interview today, Tony, why don't you pick up on that? So the greater human, the lesser human, a lot of, would you say that has to do with the racism, all those different types of things as well. So it's something in the world today, that's something we can see a lot of in social media and many different aspects. Would you say that's something the human society or human in a macro level is experiencing now?
Yes, I'm going to give you your viewers a way to look at things differently from now on into eternity. Okay. Divorce ourselves from blame and judgment. Sit back and observe. This is what you will notice, and that is that 75 major human cultures. Show me a lesser being, I will show you trouble up ahead. It will be constant in nature. It will look the same. This is the mathematics of lesser beings right here.
Sure.
Resentment introduced itself into the human experience for the first time. The natural default of resentment is vengeance. Mm-hmm. Vengeance will then always execute upon insurgency. So wherever there's a lesser being, wherever there's a lesser being, on paper, we're going to collapse in a way that's going to look exactly the same as every other one. So a lesser being is not about a situational insult. No, this is a torpedo to the bow of human DNA. I'm talking about
which it resets, and then another culture then will insert itself. Sure,
and that would explain why we start the whole thing over again. We don't understand ourselves in any way, and now we very much can. Mm-hmm. I point out that 200 years ago, we had yet to determine that we evolved. Okay,
sure.
So that meant that every human set of human beings that would come into contact with one another, they might as well have been space aliens to one another. They had no idea that they had come from the same place, which, by the way, is not conjecture of any kind. Human beings started their journey on Earth in the African Congo Basin. That is no longer conjecture. Remember that we are problem solvers here. We need to have central assumptions in place. There are a few.
Sure.
One, we evolved on planet Earth. If somebody doesn't think that, we welcome that with no reservation of any kind. Our assumptions are we evolved and we know where we started. So that puts all 8 billion human beings who seem to be at one another's throats and is not in their DNA to do that. It puts us all in the same place.
Sure.
So remember, this goes back to problem solving. We have to get everybody in the same room, and that does it right out of the gate. So the Homo sapien took over from Homo erectus 275,000 years ago, and she had a wondrous spirit, and it would take us. Absolutely. It would take us 250,000 years to get everywhere around the globe. And if we didn't collaborate, we died. So this is not a hard sell. The idea that collaborate or die met head on with acquire. The dynamics are clashing dynamics. And we see this all around us today. We know it's not right. In our hearts and minds where we live. That's our DNA. It's not right. We're onto something. We're actually swimming clinically. This is really important. We are clinically swimming upstream against what we're meant to do.
So with Noēsis, the foundational aspect of it and the mission of it, what is it? So you've explained to us what has happened, where we're going. What is the mission of Noēsis that we can all be mindful of that? Because it can be a little overwhelming to hear, gosh, I'm one person and this is an evolutionary track. So what can I do to better that? So 2 questions. The first one, what is the mission of Noēsis? And secondly, as a listeners, what can we do as an individual to move us towards the awakening of the information you're imparting with us?
Well, there are only, if we try to change what the models that we have, they came into being and we were born into them and we're swept along by them. We're not moving along. We're swept along. I mean, I think that's fair. So try to change it. It'll snap back on you real hard. It's set on automatic.
Sure.
We can, a constant foretells the future, James. How does it work? 2 plus 2 equaled 4 yesterday. It equals 4 today. It will, in fact, equal 4 tomorrow. So a constant foretells the future. We are failing right now globally in precisely the same fashion that we failed 75 times by the churn of perpetual conflict.
Sure.
So we are, first of all, we have to understand, we have to own it. One of your guests said this. I loved it. Rini. Okay.
Oh, Rini Cavallari, yeah.
Yeah, well, good work by her.
That's right, yeah.
She's onto something. Watch this. She was talking about stop and switch. It's a very common thing where we're overwhelmed by a feeling. We stop, we switch. She was talking about stop it. The human race has to own what these compulsions and impulses that we think we've banished to the basement. They're not going anywhere because they're not thinking mechanisms. We would ask 200,000 generations of humans before us to release their prisoners? No. They're making the rules. So Rini correctly said, she talked about somebody honking their horn at us. What happens to us? We want to pull them out of the car for one delicious second, don't we? All right.
Certainly.
Exactly. One delicious second. We go into our primitive brain like that. The thinking mind has no capacity to override impulses that activate 20 times faster than the thinking brain. And that's the delicious second I'm talking about. Clearly, so what I'm trying to explain to people is this. Watch this. Human beings are misinterpreting their environment all day, every day.
Certainly. Yep. From a psychological standpoint, I agree with that. A neurological standpoint, rather.
Exactly. Now, here's the socio-mathematical aspect of what we do. We misinterpret threats. The human mind does not bargain with threats. We pulverize threats. So if we misinterpret a threat out of the gate, the response that we bring back mathematically has to be bigger than the threat that we perceive because we need to vanquish that threat, don't we?
Sure.
That suddenly explains the absolute cartoon-like things we see around us today, these massively overblown reactions. We're misinterpreting threats. There's nothing wrong with us. This flawed thing, the self-loathing that we've arrived at as a species is undeserved. But we're fighting 200,000 years of our own evolutionary baggage, and we blame ourselves for succumbing to what overpowers the brain out of the gate. So maybe we should stop beating ourselves up. And self-loathing over a self-loathing species acts suicidally. I could go on, but I don't need to. Now, if we were to cross over by understanding that we are not guilty of the existential crimes we've charged ourselves with, now we can view ourselves with empathy on a large scale, and what feels empathy for itself will preserve itself. So we're trying to, like Rini, we're trying to transport an entire human species that thinks it's flawed and views itself with self-loathing as a result into a disposition of empathy on a large scale where we now say, hey, what are we my God, what are we doing? Now,
Sure.
that's going to
I think that's
take
one of the things.
decades.
Yeah, of course. I think that's one of the things we all can be mindful of is our reactions. As we know, our body doesn't necessarily understand pain per se, it can perceive multiple aspects of it, but we assign a word to a certain construct or feeling. For example, the moon. It's actually not the word, it's not the moon, because that's just a word we've created. And so often when we internalize situations and understand situations, we've created templates of this means this, so therefore I must respond this way. And so what I'm understanding you to say, from a very micro standpoint, micro meaning individually standpoint, that is when we can reconstruct how we interact in the world around us and not be the reactive version of self and be more mindful of, well, this is what I see happening, but it doesn't necessarily mean I have to respond the way I've always responded before. So to be able to switch that and be able to understand that I do have choices. And so if we can all do that on a micro level, individually do that, we will hopefully be able to break the aspect of where the human evolution is going.
Yes, again, but I must default to honesty here. We're up against something way greater than we even know. And remember that we are hope and remedy here. So we need to make inconvenient points like this. Many people think that we're here to prevent human extinction. We most certainly are not. There is something way more dangerous that stalks the human race and every other thing that ever lived. And that is that there have been 5 billion extinctions on this planet, James. 99.9% of anything that ever lived here is gone, right? So the idea that this could not happen to us, A, is preposterous. And B, it need not be. Okay, it need not be. But we're not concerned with extinction. That means the lights are out. We're concerned with a term called commitment to extinction. All 5 billion of these extinctions featured one common thing. They all committed to their demise long before the last of their kind fell. The point of commitment is that mathematical place past which, no matter who we think we are, we've clocked out. Right? That is only discernible in retrospect. We are here to avoid the specter of commitment to what we can't reverse out of.
Yeah, I know that unfortunately our time is going to be up in just a second. I know you have so many videos that you've already done, and I know Noēsis is creating so many, giving so much information, helping us as a human species be able to move forward. But unfortunately, since our time is up, if my viewers and listeners want to get these educational videos, want to learn more about Noēsis, want to work with you, want to learn all these things, where will they find all this information online?
Okay. Noēsisproject.com.
My viewers and listeners also know that if I can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I will link you with Tony Wall, and you can learn more about Noēsis. Have a wonderful day. I appreciate your time.